Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast, where we are delighted to be partnering with the Dublin International Film Festival, which runs from the 20th of February to Sunday the 2nd of March. So check out diff.ie for the full lineup. In this episode, we chat with producer and co-director Remi Alfallah about her stellar career, going out on her own, and her wonderful short film Dollar Babies, which is screening at the festival. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited to talk to you about everything, about life.
Well, you have had such an interesting life.
Wow.
But we're here specifically to discuss your short film that is screening at DIFF in a really wonderful program. But I think first, before we get into your projects, I'd love to learn about your journey.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about it. Obviously, I've never been to DIFF. I actually only recently, I feel like in the last 2 years, kind of got introduced to Ireland and sort of the Irish culture and Irish people. My girlfriend is Irish, who also worked on Dollar Babies and is such a big part of sort of the reason that I'm connected to all of this. But I'm very excited to be there and to see it. And I think, it's such a great festival. Even without that, as a fan, I think I would be happy to go. But yeah, I'm not from Ireland. Obviously, I'm American. I'm from Los Angeles, and my father's from Kuwait. So I kind of have an unusual mix as a background. And I grew up between the Middle East. I lived in Kuwait and Dubai a lot for like my formative years, and then I moved back to California for high school, which is where my mom is from, like I said. And I think there, my sister was always my older sister, who is now my business partner, and another producer, was always interested in film. She was one of those kids, I think, at 7 years old, like had the camera and like was so pick me about it. She was like, I love this movie and I have this poster. And I was like there. And I was happy to kind of be along for the ride. I loved film and I loved movies, but I think my relationship with film has definitely evolved. I've gone through periods where I was not interested in going to the cinema at all, but I loved movies. And then I've gone through periods where I've seen a movie every day, for months on end. And so my sister was really into film. I was not. I already mentioned this to you briefly, but the only thing I knew I really liked was comedy, and whether that was some sort of like front, for all whatever other stuff I was, dealing with or feeling. I think comedy was just so important to me. Me as somebody that like always tried to be like this funny class clown kind of person, and also somebody that always watched comedy, starting with the Amanda Show and Amanda Bynes and like dumb comedy and like or like childlike comedy, I should say. And then sort of moving into when I moved to America for high school, I had friends, of course, just from my mom being from there, but I didn't have so many friends. And I had just moved schools and, I'd moved from the Middle East, where my dad is Muslim, obviously. And I moved then to a Catholic school in California because that's the school that would take me. And, my mom being Catholic, I think that's something that she was very happy to put me into this all-girls Catholic school, which was a big change. And so I was kind of in that period where I didn't have that many friends. I didn't have a lot of plans on the weekends. And so my plan was often to watch Saturday Night Live on Saturday nights. And I kind of just slipped into this routine of every Saturday I would watch it. My mom would watch it with me. And that was when I kind of knew, I was like, okay, comedy is something that's really important to me. This is like a pillar for me. And so I went to USC in California, the University of Southern California. I ended up going there for university. And I went to business school, but at the same time, my sister was in the film program. So I took a lot of film classes, and that was my introduction to like writing and producing and directing and all of these different, sides to film.
And actually, to take you back a little bit,
Yeah,
so as a teenager who's consuming film,
sure.
who's or consuming comedy in that way, what was it about it that was the thing that you could really, that you were so drawn to it? Was it that it was kind of speaking truth in a way that was heard? Was it that it was a way of expressing things without, without being confrontational? Was it that the perspective, that unique perspective that it would,
Yeah.
what was it specifically, that thing? Because then you were mentioned that you started your love with physical comedy as
Yeah.
an expression. But yeah, no, I'd really love to get into the psychology of that.
Yeah.
And in a girls' school, in a world where, like, I mean, you're the younger generation to me, but like, where that comment, that flippant comment, you're so funny for a girl, and again, I think there's like a sort of nature to all girls' schools as well. There's a politics to it that's so different.
Definitely. God, it's so interesting, when you talk about the psychology of it, because it's one of those weird things that you kind of never want to get in, like you never want to like think about it too much because then you're like, why? am I so drawn to this like, comedy? And I often say that, and this is the truth, I don't have to say it, but comedians are, they're so dark. Like, inherently they're just dark people. And I don't want to generalize. Obviously, there are people that maybe aren't, but I just think that like the through line and this connecting piece of all comedians is this like darkness that they have, right, really close to the surface that they are, and which is why I think also they're so easily able to tap into the funny side, because it's almost like they've seen the picture as a whole. It's kind of dark, and there's what's left. If you're not going to dwell on the darkness, you may as well make something light of it. And I think for me, maybe because I was going through like it wasn't really a hard time. I don't want to be like some, dramatic thing. People have gone through much worse. So I just think, as a teen, as an early teen, as a girl, changing schools, all those kind of awkward things, not having a lot of friends, people making fun of like the length of your skirt, or like, I didn't blow dry my hair all the time, all these random little things that weren't that big of a deal in the grand scheme. I think when you're like a 14-year-old girl, feel like really big. And so I think just something about people, I also think comedy, and especially SNL, there's like a real intelligence to it. And I think people focusing, and you don't have to look a certain way to do comedy. It's very like personality driven. It's very, like I said, physical comedy is so like of the body. And I think something about that, I was just really drawn to it. I was just really like, nothing here. If in fact, looking different is often helpful, in comedy.
And at that stage, was it something that you just consumed, or was it something you were quietly working away on, or would it be something that you would practice outwardly?
I don't think I meant to practice it outwardly. I think like I'm really blunt, honestly. And I think like sometimes people think that's funny, but really I was just really honest. And I think maybe that stemmed from that. But I didn't no, I wasn't like a writer. I never like practiced. Like I didn't ever think of myself as a comedian. I never really wanted to do stand-up because I was always a little too shy, which maybe lent itself to now, producing or directing because it's more like the behind the scenes. But I just really liked I just really found, it was reprieve. I just enjoyed it as something to like relax to and watch, and similar to the way somebody would put on Friends or Gilmore Girls. I think it was like for me, comedy was just like I was able to relax to it, and sort of turn off. And I also think it was really nice because I think comedy is really timely. It's very like you have to know what's going on in the world in order to make humor that's relevant and to make something that's funny. So I think the sort of combination of all of that, of sort of knowing what's going on in the world as somebody that like was trying, kind of moving all the time, and the other side of it, I just really enjoyed. I don't know. I don't mean to even dwell on it. And now I'm like, wow, maybe I meant to like go back to comedy. When I worked at Saturday Night Live, I wasn't sort of, and I wasn't a writer, I wasn't a comedian. I worked for the creator, Laura Michaels. And so I wasn't, somebody whose opinion was necessarily like the most important there. But I think that was why I was drawn to it at the start as my sort of intro into the world of film, TV, anything, because I think all comedy, I loved if you've ever seen like any of the National Lampoons, like Chevy Chase's films, things like that, European Vacation, or maybe other things like Animal House, like all of those things were so important to me. And then now it's so funny because any of the movies I'm producer and part of have not had that same funny bone in them. They're very like dark and sad and whatever. But that's again sort of the another side to the same coin, is that, if as soon as you flip over the comedy, there's like such darkness. And so I think it's important to be able to do both, honestly.
And that there's so much humor in your work. But okay, we'll go on your career journey because that's why I'm digging down into this because it's
My
so
journey.
so
Okay, it's
interesting.
gonna be a
Yeah,
quick segment.
you're only in college now. We only have you in college.
Oh
This is
yeah, okay. I'm in college.
yeah.
So after college, I went to SNL.
Getting in there is a story. I think that is very very. I'm going to keep stopping you because I was like, that's so.
No, please. Getting in there was really, really hard, very hard. So when I was at USC, I would always talk about working at SNL. And I said, I need to meet somebody that's gonna, connect me. I need to whatever. Because as you said, SNL is very like a closed, unless you know somebody there, it's kind of this like oasis thing.
The second city. Like if you go up through the improv ranks, like if you want to be a performer, but
Well,
you
if you want to be a performer, there's other, like you said, yeah, and then you can audition and do things like that. But as a producer, on the sort of the behind the scenes side, I knew that because I knew I wasn't going to be a performer. I just didn't really have it in me then. Maybe now. Like maybe going back as an adult, I'm saying maybe I would have enjoyed that route. But at that point, I had no desire for that. And so on the producing side, it was really hard I didn't know anybody that worked there. And especially being in LA, it's a very New York, it's so New York. It's so specific to that culture that not a lot of people in LA know a lot of people that worked in New York there. And so I would always talk about it. Da, 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 da. I finally, through my older sister, I mentioned it, and a friend of hers, said, hey, I can put in a good word for you for like an internship or a something, a PA kind of job, but there's no promises. But I can just, shoot an email over to the person that I know there. And I was like, you are my only hope. I have never met anybody else that has even offered that. I would so appreciate it. I was graduating at the time from USC. And so they did that. They sent an email introduction. I didn't hear anything. Months went by. I had moved on. I was like, oh, they're not going to reach out. They get so many da da da. And I got another job. I was actually going to move to London at that point. I got a job in the UK because I was like, if I'm not going to stay in LA, I was over LA at this point. I needed something fresh. And if it wasn't going to be New York, it was going to be London. I got this job. I landed in London. I'm in August at this point. I land in London. I have this whole moment. I get off a plane. I put my bags in a hotel because I'm going to look at flats this week. And I have this moment of like, I'm walking through Hyde Park. It's like my movie moment, with my headphones. I'm like, this is my new life. I'm going to be in London. I'm going to be a UK person, whatever. And as soon as I do that, of course, 2 hours go by. I'm sitting on the bench in Hyde Park and I get an email from somebody at SNL, Lorne Michaels' assistant, that said, hey, so sorry this took us a while, but would you like to come in tomorrow to the office for a meeting? No context, no interview. They didn't say what it was for. They didn't say who I was meeting. Just, would you like to come by the office? So I called my mom and I said, SNL just emailed me. What do I do? And she said, you get your shit out of your suitcase that you need and you get on a plane and you go to New York because that was your dream and like you're not going to give it up. You get on the plane. And
Did
so
you get, was there a flight in time that had space that got you there for the next day? Because what is it?
I
It's
was
five
yeah, because it had
hours?
only
Oh my
been I
God, the
had landed
stress
at
of that.
I had landed at 6 a.m. It was only like 10 a.m. when I got this email. So by like 2 p.m. I was on a flight back to New York. I stayed at a friend's house. I texted, I was like, hey, I'm coming. I brought three different jackets and like one pair of pants. Please help me decide what I'm going to wear to my meeting. And I went to my meeting the next day at SNL. I met a bunch of producers. There was no job for me. They just were doing it to be nice, like to introduce me to everybody. And at the end of, I had met a couple producers, and at the end, they were like, "Okay, well, thanks for coming. If anything opens up, like we'll be in touch." And I thought, I flew all the way back for this, like
You
to get
would have
nothing.
though.
Yeah, oh, I would have.
Now.
So then, yeah, but so then I asked, I said, is there anybody else that I can meet of a producer? And they said, well, there is this guy, Chris, who runs the film unit, which are make the pre-tapes of SNL. There's like those commercial segments that they pre-film. You can meet with him, but he may not be available for like an hour or two, so you can hang out. So I hung out because I was like, what else do I have to be doing? I have no plans. I'm in New York. And when I saw him, I met with him. I told him about my background. I said, I went to USC. I worked on a couple sets, da, da, da. And he was like, okay, well, thanks for coming. And I said, I don't want to beg you, but if you can give me any sort of job, I will tell my parents that I got hired by SNL and I will move to New York, but I just need a yes. And he was like, I don't really have a job opening. I can give you a PA job on set, like once a week. You PA, like you're whatever it is, you're a production assistant, and you'll set up the video village for the directors. You'll help with the crafty. The hours are really weird at SNL. It's like 2 a.m. to like 10 p.m. the next day, but I can give you that once a week during the season. And I said, that's great. Please send me an email saying that I got that job. And I'm going to tell my parents that I got a job at SNL. And I did that. And he sent me the email. I told my parents I got a full-time job at SNL. I kind of lied. And they helped me move to New York. And that was it. And I worked at the PA. And then 3 months later, they offered me the job as a receptionist in the office. And I did that. And then I met Lorne Michaels, and an opening in his office opened up, and I interviewed. I was gonna say I auditioned, which is probably how it felt, but I interviewed, and then I got that job, and
And
then I
and
just
so so working on that desk, I presume you know all the people that are rude that you can't talk about. Do you know like the people that are nice and the people that are secretly mean and the people that are secretly
100%.
like
Oh yeah,
how,
for sure.
oh the gossip. And
Have you
then
ever been in it? Have you ever been an assistant
no.
yourself? Oh, you didn't get that. It's like being a waiter or something, it's like one of those jobs that you have to do it. You get all the info as an assistant, and you really, like you said, you really know how people are and treat people the way based on how they treat you as an assistant.
And then in terms of being in there and even just getting to like, I mean, it is kind of the main comedy institution and all of the key works that have come, the films, the
Yeah,
comedians have been there. Like it's just everything. It's
definitely.
like the thing that has spawned everything, like probably for the last at least 40 years.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was our 50th anniversary this weekend. Yeah, 50 years anniversary. Yeah, like you said, it was just so much history. I think being there felt like such an honor, like it's one of those places where even just sitting there, and I think that's also how you kind of convinced yourself to keep going, because even after the shitty days, you were like, but it's an honor to be here. Those institutional places where I think half of the battle is just getting in the door and then feeling like you kind of have to keep earning your way to staying. But yeah, it was a great experience. And I think, like I said, I worked for Lord Michaels as his assistant for a couple of years, and it was a great experience. I don't think of anybody more highly, honestly. I just like as a boss, as a mentor, I just learned so much during my time there. I still learn all the time, even just not being there. Like I think just hearing about what goes on, or if I ever, sort of re-engage with any of those people, I think it's just such a place. It was such a great place to start my career because it was also so challenging. It was so hard. The hours were so difficult. Like the workplace dynamics are so tricky because it's like a trauma bond. You're there like so many hours with these people every week, Monday to Saturday, not even Friday.
And people are exhausted and the stakes are so high as
Things are so
well.
high. Yeah, it's live. If anything's ever a live show, there's such pressure. Even if you're not the one performing or doing it, there's pressure to like do your tiny piece because it's like a domino effect. Like if one person doesn't do their part, then the next person can't do their part, which means, it's the snowball effect.
The world is watching. Like the world is watching everything happen. So like that, like if anything happens, like everyone in the like or like
Yeah,
such a
sure.
huge section of the population of Earth has seen it that it's like the stakes
Yeah,
are incredibly
yeah,
high.
exactly. I remember there was one show, and during the shows, Lauren watches from his sort of, little viewing area by the stage. And if you watch any of like the SNL documentaries, you'll see this, what I'm saying. But I would stand there just in case, he needed anything or if anybody kind of whatever as the assistant. So I'd be watching the live show. And I remember, I forget who it was that was the performer. But at one point there, one of the soundboard, where they control all the music, obviously, just stopped working. Like it essentially like it didn't explode, but there was essentially something happened. And I remember these crew guys, and you only have like 2 minutes, but for to change the before it starts, they say 2 minutes to whatever, and it's live, as you know. And I remember they threw this like sort of music soundboard thing onto the floor, and there were like 100 guys, just like at it trying to figure it out, and it just wasn't working, and it wasn't working. And this artist was on stage. I don't want to say who it was because if I get it wrong, I'll feel bad. But and I remember like watching in real time this person being like, what do I do? Like if the music doesn't play, what is my plan? Combined with like Lauren, trying to relay that with these people trying to figure it out. And it was just like 100 people then trying to figure out what to do. And obviously I'm just, a bystander at this point. But it was so interesting to see. And it didn't end up working. They didn't get the soundboard back up and they had to just play it acoustic, I think. But it's those high stakes, like what you were saying, that everything ends up being fine. Like the reality is like it's always fine, even if the person just talks to camera, it's fine, but it doesn't feel in the moment fine. So I think working in a place like that then helps because then as I moved out of SNL, and not to like just jump ahead, but after 3 years of being there, 3.5, whatever, I was offered a job from a company called Imagine Entertainment. Um, that is Brian Grazer and Ron Howard's company. Obviously, they've done such great work, A
Yeah.
Beautiful Mind and such Amazing Splash and all these great films. And, then they owned also a Jax at the time, and still, I guess, when I moved to that company was producing Emily in Paris and, Search Party and these great shows too. They had offered my sister, who is now my business partner, they said, who at the time was working at Sony at Linda Opes Productions, who did, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days and Interstellar and these great movies. My sister was their vice president at the time, and I was at SNL. They had offered the two of us to come together for this production overall deal, which is kind of like a first look as producers. And as being an assistant at this point, of course, the goal is to produce, like you don't want to be an assistant forever. And you also don't want to overstay your welcome in certain offices. You kind of want to move when it feels like, have I gotten as much out of it as I think I could? Am I going to leave on a good note where my relationships will all be positive ones? Because I had seen at that company, if you overstay, also, you can leave with people having a bitter taste in their mouth about, you leave at the wrong time. You don't know when your window is. And I think I was really conscious to not do that, to not, I was in a good place with Lauren, with my peers, that I was like, if I leave now, I'll leave in a way where they know that I work hard. They know that I'm, you know, even 10% intelligent. I'll leave in a place that's fine to move on. And so we were offered this overall deal, and then I moved back to LA to do that. And I think, yeah, I definitely learned, I brought all the stuff I learned at SNL to that. And it made me have this pressure that maybe other people didn't have as much. Like, I'd be in the office and everybody's so chill. And I was like, why? Everybody's so chill here. I'm so not used to that. Like, there needs to be a fire to be put out all the time. And when there wasn't a fire, I was like, you guys are kind of weird.
So your whole nervous system was rewired so that you couldn't, you felt uncomfortable and calm.
Totally. Yeah. And I was calm,
Yeah.
and obviously it was a different kind of calm because I wasn't busy all the time. I was, you had to make your own busy. So, because I was an independent deal. So it wasn't like you had somebody on your ass being like, do the job, where's the stuff? Where's the stuff? It was like you're independent. So what that means is, for an overall deal, what it basically is, it was kind of like a first look where it was like, we want to work with cool writers, cool directors, young talent. You and your sister bring us these projects first, and we want to have first dibs on these new scripts and things that, might be cool for us, to have and put under our brand because they want it to freshen up. And so all of a sudden you have this pressure on yourself, but the only person that obviously you had people checking in, but it wasn't like a day-to-day thing where it was like you have this deadline to hit, on Saturday night. It was like do it at your own pleasure. And so yeah, I think also it's really easy to slip into this mindset. It's also really, and I think maybe this is something that I would like to talk about actually, or more young people need to hear about. Whenever you go from a job like that to a job that's more independent, it's really easy to get down about yourself and about your life and about like because you don't feel as busy. And I think we're wired to when you don't feel 100% busy all the time, or when you don't have that deadline on you or that pressure, if you were used to that, you can all of a sudden feel like you're like lacking in some way, like you crave the chaos, you crave the high, of the pressure and the work and the deadline. And I think as soon as I didn't feel that, I really struggled. Like I was happy for a month or two. I was like, this is so great. I'm so calm. There's nobody on me. I haven't had this in so long. And then after that 2 month or 3 month window, I think I hit a wall where I was like, whoa, I feel really weird. And I don't know if I like this, and I kind of miss the chaos, and I miss feeling like my nervous system is on edge. And like what you said, and I think sometimes I'm a big believer, and I don't always think that. I think a lot of people are like, that's only toxic, and you don't want to have your nervous system be wired like that. I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think you don't also want to get used to your nervous system being totally relaxed all the time too. I think like those responses are what makes good work too. Like having a little bit of fire behind and a little bit of anxiety almost is what gets you to provide good results.
Yeah, sometimes you can kind of over question things. And like that, I think you're there's something about creative instincts that when they're completely pure and that analytical part of your brain doesn't kick in and overthink, like in that heat of the moment, you can create things so much faster and so much better and so much more
Yeah,
authentic. Like
totally.
that when you kind of go into that, like, yeah, you're overworking things and you're overthinking things. But it's like, I think it's like lots of people talk about getting into the creative flow of work and like and hitting that, but then like that, if there's no rush or there's no urgency, yeah, you don't, you
Yeah.
kind of be second guessing yourself in that time rather than just kind of like going where it leads.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was a mix, like I think after SNL, I do think that the pendulum maybe for myself swung maybe too far the other side, where I was almost a little too lax for a second, on myself and on the requirements because I was like, oh no, this is fine. Like you're getting used to it. You deserve this kind of like, it wasn't a break, but you deserve this sort of new pace. I think it definitely swung where I was like maybe a little too calm and I wasn't like, hustling as much. The hustle culture had subsided. And then I think only recently in the last, year, the pendulum has now found its right balance where I'm like, okay, it's good to hustle, but also to know when to stop hustling. It's good to know when to turn off the hustle and to just be a normal person that can exist and not be constantly needing to like make the most out of every meeting, conversation, talk. Like sometimes you can just also exist as a human and try to grow for yourself, and that will reflect back in your work and relationships and life. I don't know, maybe not.
I'd love to know as well sort of what you learned from each space,
Oh
like
God.
going on production now, are you able, like, like while you're on set and while everything is kind of like going to shit around you and things are broken and lights are broken and then there's a delay and everything's running late, are you just able to be like, this is fine though? This is so much less bad.
Yeah, I think it's a mix. I think I definitely learned that like I feel a lot better when there's pressure. Like I feel better in myself when there's like not only pressure, but like when I feel useful actively, when there's an active need for me somewhere, I think that's really helpful to me, whether it's on set or at a place like SNL or even in my own life, like being passive is really hard and being just existing and kind of coasting is not for me as much as I want it to be for me. And being calm is not my thing. And I was actually in a meeting the other day because I was in a meeting with another friend of mine, and we had gone in to meet like these agents, just to like talk about projects and stuff. And I was really hyper, as you see now, like I talk a lot, and it's kind of like it's not my charm, but like the only way I'm ever getting a meeting is from talking. My passive personality is not as good. I need to be like, go, go, go. And at one point, somebody had left the room. I hope she's not listening to this because she'll think I'm still dwelling on it. And I'm not. I've moved past it, probably.
If they're
And
in America, they're probably not. I think most of us are in the Ireland and the UK, so you're probably safe.
good. Yeah, my Irish and UK friends can listen in while I gossip about my friend. And so this agent had left the room, and my friend, in air quotes, looked at me and she was like, "You need to chill. Like, do you need to take it all the way down?" She was like, "Just like calm down." And I understood. And at first, it was like I was like, "Oh yeah," and then I was kind of pissed off because I was like, "You know what? You need to calm down," because I was like, this is kind of, that's the reason that I get any of my work is because, or get my projects is because I talk a lot and I put myself out there, and that's just my personality, and that's the draw, not the draw for everybody, but that's the thing that I like about myself is that side of me is when I'm hyper and a little bit forward and a little bit whatever. And I said, we have different, and I kind of had to tell her that we have different charms. And I'm saying not that this is charming, but I'm saying that is the thing that makes me feel the most myself in a meeting in those environments. Whereas for her, she's so much more of a like an introvert. She's very, she's very like, it's not passive, but she's very like, she takes it in and kind of processes it on her own time. Whereas I'm like constantly asking questions, I'm constantly talking. I need to like talk it out with the person. And I was like, I would appreciate not questioning my process because that's just how I am. Like the way that you want to be quiet, I want to not shut the hell up.
And find it. And because that's it, you can probably see where it's going. So you're like, no, no, I need it to go this way. No, no, and I only have
Yeah.
such a finite amount of time. You need to tell me now. If you're going this way, it has to go. Like, but in
Yeah.
terms of developing work and in terms of like being around these two sort of very different formats, and one would be like comedy, and it would be like and producing work that sort of is that quick eye on society, and then the other is storytelling, which is sort of I think it's more that you have to tap into like a deep range of kind of longer emotions. And I'm
Yes.
just wondering how you felt making that shift as well in terms of, yeah, like that,
That
like
was hard.
spending more time with character. But I mean, all the best SNL skits that like there's such a dark truth. It's just that we see like a snippet of someone that's
A bit.
really, really real in that moment and you get like a full sense of the word. But like, but you know, though, you have to really get into the engine of characters and to have plot that kind of
Yeah.
stands that
Yeah.
length.
It's really difficult. Honestly, it was really hard. And it wasn't hard necessarily, like you said, to get into the characters so much because like it's kind of like, when you love your favorite film, you can put it on 100 times and you are so like, you get accustomed and you have this good relationship with the characters. I just think actually less of the characters, but revisiting projects consistently, on a weekly basis. And like as you're developing stuff, like you said, knowing when to that, okay, we're going to develop this script with this writer and we're going to do like multiple notes passes, and this process can take a couple weeks, but more than likely it will take a few months, if not, sometimes years. Like I have a TV show that we're just about to start pitching, and it's been 4 years in the works, or 3.5 years, since I had the first intro call, and we haven't even pitched it, and that was, obviously there were other pieces involved, like contracts and sh finding a showrunner and all that stuff, but to sit with those characters and still like them, still feel like they're important enough to want to talk about or show to the world, it was really hard because I would lose interest really quickly, I found. And sometimes just be like, oh, I would feel burnt out. As much as SNL, like as work culture would burn me out, revisiting the same work a lot of times it would burn me out sometimes in a different way. And I would be like, oh, okay, I gotta, we gotta do these notes. And reading the script for the third or fourth or fifth time, I was just like, okay, I'm ready for something fresh. But that was just sort of this like mindset that I had, like you said, where every Wednesday at SNL you're reading sketches, even if you're an assistant, even if you're like just a PA, that's what you're used to, is because that's the environment is like new, it's topical, it's new, it's quick, it's a few minutes. So yeah, it's really difficult, but I do think it's allowed me to now sit into a different appreciation for the work, for myself, for the characters, for the people involved in film, like I now, especially this year, I don't know what shifted in me. Like 6 months ago, I've had this like new love of movies that I haven't felt in so long, that I'm trying to now, and maybe it's just because I have more movies going, and actually the progress I can see the tangible work. So maybe I just feel more invigorated by by the stuff coming out, or inspired. But I suddenly am like, oh yeah, there's something so beautiful about people that commit to characters, and the way that you commit to relationships and friendships. People really commit to these stories and are so excited about them years later. And there's something about that is reflective of film as a whole, and same. And I feel like sometimes at SNL, like my friendships with people felt like so day to day. Like one day I was really friends with a coworker, and the next day we weren't, I felt like we didn't get along maybe. And I think that was also reflective of the environment, it was so day to day. Whereas with film, you're playing the long game, you really have to commit. And so I think it was a hard start, but I think as I mature and get a little bit older, it's maybe what's necessary for me. Like I have more to say longer.
And I, oh my God, I actually think I could sit here and talk to you for like 5 hours, but I
I know,
won't.
sorry, I'm talking at you for 5 hours.
No, I love this all. And this is the thing, I wouldn't let you go past things. I was like, no, no, we're not skipping by this. I want to dig into this because there's a lot to each and every
Same.
section. So we, there's even more I want to dig into, but we just have to go straight. We have to go straight to this fantastic short film. You won Lurking. Is it about to premiere in Sundance?
After Imagine, my sister and I worked together. We went independent about a year ago. So we left Imagine, we ended our deal, and we decided to go independent. I think when we left, we decided, okay, we had to put our heads down and say, what is the best way that we know how to produce? I think my main job, again, air quotes for listeners, is I'm a producer, first and foremost, more than a director. Obviously, I'm talking to you about something I directed and produced, which is like why I'm so excited, because I don't do that often. But we decided that, what is our best way to produce? And we had two ways to produce, which is one, the development side, developing scripts. We're going to be more creative producers, and which is a lead producer on projects. And then also, we now executive produce too, which is a different thing, which is just, we have different things that we can bring to projects, whether that's financing, whether that's talent, locations, other kinds of ideas, and that's a different kind of our producing. So I was just at Sundance with a film called Bunny Lover, which has Rachel Sennett in it, which was really exciting. And it's, our company, RNA Pictures, is on that film. And I think that was a really great sort of one of our first films that, has been out and premiered and kickstarted our sort of company, which is great. And the year before, my sister was there with a film called Little Death, which was with Dominic Fike and David Schwimmer, and also, won the Innovator Award. So between the years, I think Sundance has become kind of now this like pillar for us, where we always want to, I hope to always have a movie at Sundance, because as a festival, it's just so important and great for like debut filmmakers.
And when you go to a festival like that with a project like that, are you kind of hustling for the next thing? So you were saying hustle culture. Are you going, actually, I
Yeah,
have this, I just need a bit more money, or I have this in place? Or is it a case of you're just going to celebrate in your
it's kind of
achievement?
both. Like you're kind of celebrating, obviously, because you're like, this is so fun, and I want to celebrate this movie, and I want to be in my 20s, and I want to have fun with all these people that like worked on this thing. I think also you're trying to sell the movie. So you're trying to meet buyers, and you're trying to sweet talk people and try to get people excited about things that they should be excited about, and be like, Rachel Sennett is in this movie. Oh my God. And like Katarina, our director, she's gonna be massive. You're doing the pitching thing. But you're also celebrating, and you're also looking for like new work in like filmmakers. I was like trying to meet new writers and meet new directors and people that I can kind of like reach out to and say, hey, I want to work with you, or hey, do you want to work with me? And since then, I've been sent so many scripts just from Sundance alone. So that's part of why I love going there. And then, we also worked on The Apprentice this year, which was Ali Abbasi's film, which obviously has, Oscar nominations for Jeremy Strong and Sebastian Stan, which I think is so cool, and they were so talented. And Ali Abbasi is an amazing director.
Yeah, an Irish
And then,
co-production.
Irish co-production. It was Screen Ireland, who I met with multiple times because anytime I have any sort of loose idea for a project, I call Screen Ireland or anybody that I know there, and I'm like, "Hey, would you want to make this in Ireland?" And they are always like, "Yeah, sure. Bring it here. Bring anything here." They're so nice. They just want everything to come to Ireland, and I do too selfishly because I have all my friends there, and I want to live in Ireland for a few months. An Irish co-production, exactly. And then now, currently we have a film that's coming out. This is before I talk about Dollar Babies, which is my number one dollar baby. But we have a film at South by Southwest called American Sweatshop with Lily Reinhart, which is premiering there in 2 weeks. And so I'm very excited about that film. And then yeah, our most recent film is wrapping this week. We filmed it mostly in Kentucky, and we're some of the lead producers, and it's called Dead Man's Wire, and that's one of Gus Van Sant's new films with Bill Skarsgård and Coleman Domingo, who are so talented, like just the cast alone, and Al Pacino and Dacre Montgomery. It's just like stacked, amazing talent, that is. We're very excited, and like I said, for our company, I think that's why I feel so invigorated. Is just I'm like eager to see people's response to any of the movies that we're working on.
And is that part of it? That I suppose if you've worked sort of like in the development section for so long, and if you've, or like, on set, this is a different thing where you're sitting next to the audience members at different things where, like you're
Yeah.
checking in with distribution about numbers, where you're, like seeing the festivals that it's hitting. Like, is that a different like experience now that yeah.
Yeah, I think it is, like you said, because obviously you want people to like things and you want things to, as much as it doesn't matter, film is so, you may like it, you may not. But of course, if your name is on something, you want it to, at least be something that you're proud of, which I think is everybody. That goes for anything, whether it's a short, a commercial, a music video, a feature. So I think that's a new thing for me is to feel like, ooh, do people like stuff actually that I'm a part of? Because when it's something, like SNL, where you're just one of 100 people working there, or, you and especially as an assistant, you're like, it doesn't matter if you like this episode because it's not my name. Whereas with film and you're a producer, of course, there's a little bit more weight to it. And like you said, also with the selling side, as I'm sure maybe a lot of the listeners here would know, or maybe there's not a lot of money in movies. You're not here. Obviously, when you reach a certain point in your career, hopefully you can capitalize on it and you make these chunky deals and you're getting all these back end points. But the industry is not the same as it used to be. So even if you have all these back end points, you may not see a lot of money. So you're really doing it because you love it and you just hope it sells so that you can sort of make enough money to get you through the next one. You're kind of at this, at least in my phase of my career, when you're on your own, you kind of want each project to be able to carry you so that you can be focused enough and have enough bandwidth for the next one. You never want to have to be stressed about, money or what you're going to make because you just want to kind of keep pushing and say, okay, I'm good until my next movie. And that's my goal is to just be able to continue doing movies where I don't have to think about other stuff.
And you
But
get to
that's obviously,
curate the stories, the worlds that you build. You get to kind of like
yeah,
build them on that journey too and have
yeah,
more control about sort of what's being said and what's being created and that input into the tone and the voice. And
exactly.
is it different then working as a co-director? Does that like where you are on set and you were the one making those creative decisions in that moment?
Yeah, it is totally different. So like the way that Dollar Babies came about is, Shannon Halley is the star and she wrote it and she's just so talented and just, obviously is one of my best friends too. So I feel like I want to say that and make everybody know that she's just so great and wonderful and kind and cool and whatever, and dresses cool and is just like such a vibe. But beyond that, yeah, so she reached out to me in the most random way where she sent me a message. This is like, 2 years ago now on LinkedIn. And she was like, hey, and I don't really go on LinkedIn that much. I feel like in film, sometimes you go on LinkedIn, but I was like not on there, like actively looking for stuff. And I got this message from her being like, hey, I have this queer short film and it really kind of needs a producer and I want to film in LA and you're based in LA and I feel like maybe that would be a good fit. And she had seen me because my girlfriend, like I said, who also worked on this film as a producer, was kind of well known in like the socials space and online, as a queer person and, all of the things. And I think that's how she kind of became familiar with me as a producer. And I had just come out myself. And so for me, it was really important that while I was working on these larger things, it was kind of what, like you said, like what I told you when I was finding my footing of I'm not busy enough. I feel like I want to do something, but I needed something that was like mine alone because I had been part of these like teams. And I was like, I need something that's not with my sister, not with Imagine, not with SNL, something that is just for me to put my creative spirit into. And I met Shannon and I responded to her and I said, hey, I like the script and I would love to meet you and maybe help you if I can, just for a fun project. And so we met, we became really good friends, and her and I kind of developed it over a couple months and on Zoom. And she was in, New York and in Ireland and LA or whatever she was. And I was in LA, and we had a great time working together. And then another director was meant to direct it. And then last minute, a couple weeks before shooting, the director kind of fell through because she had been booked for like some massive, ESPN kind of thing. And she was like, hey, I can't turn this down. And we were like, hey, you shouldn't turn it down because they're going to pay you for like 3 years worth of your time. So please go do this massive commercial. We totally understand. And I had expressed to Shannon that I had always wanted to direct, but I didn't find the right vehicle because, you don't ever want to like risk unless you write it yourself. It's such a big undertaking to say like, hey, I feel confident and comfortable enough to take on your vision for this thing that you've worked on. She worked so hard at this thing that I was like, I don't want to do this. And here. And then when this person fell through, she was like, hey, you've always wanted to direct. I really trust you. I feel like you understand the thing that we've talked about for so long as two, queer women. You get also like, you're not going to like try to do me dirty on this project. You're going to see what I see and really make the most of it. And I was like, at that point, I felt comfortable enough with her to have that dialogue where I was like, I would love to. And then obviously Shannon works with her sister Megan a lot, who I hadn't really gotten to know. And she was like, I think Megan should co-direct too, and da, da, da. And I was like, yeah, because of course then you have this other person. And the first time that Megan and I met was in LA for this production. Really, we had met, well, on the plane to go. We flew together, but we really hadn't met that much before. We met like one time in London. And so the first time we really got to like know each other as co-directors and as friends was on set. And it was just like the most cathartic, best experience I have ever had, honestly. Like in a work setting and on a friend level, it was just like everybody showed up, and showed up in the best way possible. Like everybody was in like a great mood. They wanted to make the best thing possible. I had all of our LA crew there, and we just had the best time. It was just so, so wonderful.
And in terms of prepping for it and getting the best performance from your actors, and even those, like, there's some incredibly
Mm.
like complex shots, like that kind of like where the camera moves throughout the
The
pool scene. I was
oneer.
like, oh my God,
Oh wow,
like that
yeah.
is some shot, like.
Wow, I'm so happy you feel that way. Yeah, obviously it's weird when it's your first, especially like, I've only, not that I've done a lot. That's my first of two short films, both that I've done with Megan and Shannon. I think it's nice when you hear it back, about that shot, for instance, because yeah, like I think firstly, a short film of this tone, I feel like it's not done so much. I feel like with short films, people really try to do those like, which is great, but those heavier, they really try to get to the meat really quickly, and there's these very like beautiful, moving, like heavy subjects. This is quite a heavy subject in its own way, but I think we try to balance that with like, I don't want to say fun because that's so, surface, but it's a little bit of lightness to it and to the relationship and to like the environment. Um,
And
and
there's
so,
jokes in it. There is that kind
yeah,
of back and forth, and there's a kind of there's that, like, it is something that's very dark, but I think the relationship between your two lead characters is so warm, and
yeah.
like, yeah, that there's that kind of funniness, and even like little comments and little beats of dialogue, that it's there, so it isn't
Yeah,
heavy.
exactly. And I think like that was important for us. Like the line where Hina says, I'm not gay, are you? And then, you can kind of casually see them holding hands and like in the fadeaway, like it's small things like that that I think we were wanting to keep in because we were like, even though this kind of doesn't feel so maybe traditional, like what really is
Yeah.
nothing's,
Or the mum saying who's dead. I was like that. I was dead listening
yeah,
to that. I was like, that's so
yeah,
funny. I was like, that is such the mum
yeah,
thing.
exactly. Um, so I think yeah, sorry, I'm just like thinking about it as a like I'm just like thinking back to the film. But yeah, in terms of like the performances, I think, like I said, Shannon's a great actress. She didn't really need any help from myself or from Megan or from really anybody, obviously. And she definitely has her own process, She's very inwards on the day. Like she's very in herself and also her and Megan both, obviously Megan's an actress too, like they do never flop their lines. They never have to do things twice. They're really like, I will say, like professional in the truest sense of it. And this is coming from somebody who obviously not just specific to this
Yeah.
experience, like as being on other sets, it's not very common to see somebody that is so knows their process. And she really knows her process. With Kira, I think she's not an actress. She was on Love Island, actually, and she as before. And Kira um also is queer and has a girlfriend herself. And I think that's why it was important for us to cast somebody that was queer
Yeah.
who also wanted to get into acting. But for her, it was a little bit more. She was great considering she had never acted, and just in general. But I mean, in addition, it kind of mind blowing that she hadn't acted before. I think it was a lot about for me as a director. I realized that my style in that moment, and Megan and I think we're kind of maybe the same. Megan is very like because she's an actor, she knew how to direct actors, and I think that's why her talking to Megan, to her talking to Shannon was something. And as a sister, I think for me, I didn't really view them as actors. It was kind of more like we're all people in this room
Yeah.
doing people things. And so like even before like the scene where they like hook up or kiss or make out, that's uncomfortable. They both have girlfriends, even though they're actors and they didn't care. For me, I was more like, hey, I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable and cool. And so I remember we like played the song that they end up making out to. We would play the song multiple times and we were jumping on the bed and like I would pretend to kiss my girlfriend and just try to get in the zone of like, this is a comfortable environment. Let's just try to be comfortable. And that being said, if you're not comfortable, that's fine too. But just being like, hey, we all understand here that this is an important scene for us, for our community, for us as women, for us as friends. So like, let's just be the most like comfortable that we can be. And if you're not, then we'll just like go 100 times, or we won't go 100 times because like we're the only reason we're here is to make sure that we all feel good. And if we don't feel good, then what's the point? Like why are we here? Nobody's having a good time because we're just doing it for us and for people like us. Like there's no really other goal here.
And in terms, and that last shot as well, I just thought it's so beautiful, like the subtext of, yeah, it's just like the films, like, do you know, like it's that
Yeah.
beat. It's such a, because like I kind of, even when you're watching, you're like, what is the end? Like, where is it going to end? And then you're brought on that journey, and you're like, oh, it's like that disillusionment that we've all felt, where it's not what you thought it was, that
Yeah.
thing in that moment. And like, who are you now? Do you know, like, I just thought
Yeah.
that was such a powerful moment. And it was just done so well. And just,
Oh, thanks. I think, yeah, it's so funny you say that because the ending was actually something that we really struggled with, to be honest. Like, I think, and obviously the whole thing, it wasn't easy necessarily. I just mean, we didn't really know how to wrap it up. I think like you said, it was a weird thing because it was also a weird moment where we were like, okay, how do we want her to handle the situation? Like how this is such a weird moment for everybody. Do we want it? Firstly, do we want this sort of couple to end up together, or do we want the reality of things aren't always gonna be that easy to enter, and same with sort of this like with the gentleman in the room. Yeah, I think we tried to figure out like what honors the story and what also is the truth. I think for me, I'm really big on, yes, that might feel like what would happen, but but also not everything always happens the way that you think it's going to happen, And sometimes that doesn't mean that like you're amplifying the biggest story, like you're not maybe giving everybody like the voice that you want them to have all the time. Like sometimes people get shut down or sometimes people get stuck. And I think that's also okay to honor that we don't always, you know, there's not always a clear, easy choice that makes this character on this pedestal. Like sometimes you're just stuck with two kind of hard decisions, and that can be okay too, And I think, yeah, and then shooting those shots that sandwiched everything in Ireland, was such a nice to actually film in Ireland. It's such a nice homecoming feel for everybody, I think. And it was so beautiful. Like those are some of my favorite shots in the whole thing. Even though it feels totally different and those shots were actually done digitally and not on film, like the rest of the film is on film and those sandwich shots were done on, digital.
but
I
even
think
thematically, that really works. Like,
yeah, I thought so.
like that is like it's literally a different world, and that's
Yeah.
that point. And in terms of then when you go to see it with a audience. So were you like, okay, so you've been like with a live studio audience in SNL, you've been like presumably, like checking their social media the next day over how things are received. Then with Imagine, like you've all these projects going out that that you're getting the finest, like there's all these beats where you're like, okay, this is
Yeah,
finished. I'm gonna
sure.
take this project is great. I'm gonna take my kudos. So this one, like you really like was yours, like, and your story as much. Like, I mean, with
Yeah.
a in a much more intense way. So was it different than like going to like getting people to watch it? Like, did you feel
Yeah,
a little bit more
I haven't
vulnerable?
seen this. I haven't actually seen this film with an audience yet. So this will be my first time, which is going to be really fun, I think. Yeah, I think it also puts a lot of pressure, like you said, when you have these other kinds of projects, I think you are often, of course, comparison, right? It's the thief of joy, they say. But so I think you're constantly comparing like the response to, these features or like live audiences to, your short film, which I think are is fine to compare, but like I think I also need to remind myself, like you said, like they're not the same. The processes are different, the way that they're being shown is different. A festival is different to, a live audience, which is different to like a theatrical release that, like a Sundance, like everything's so different that you kind of have to take each one for what it is. But I'm really excited, yeah, to see it in person and to experience it with other people, I think will be really so like meaningful. Yeah, I think I'm just excited and I think I'm just happy that it's being shown and has this sort of the space to be seen. Well, so back to also just it being seen, I think it's really interesting because because there's not a lot of there is a lot of queer film, sure, but there's not a lot of queer cinema that maybe is amplified in the same way or gets the same reception or gets the attention of everybody. I think the primary reason that Eris, my girlfriend, was a producer on this is because she's really good. She does a lot of social media marketing and things like that. And I don't know if I don't think you've had a chance to meet, but so for this in particular, the way that we've been able to sort of see the demand, I guess, or see what people think about it is through socials, and I think in the queer spaces, social media is really an important place because so much of queer culture lives online, and is spread just amongst people that like need it because that's what happens on the internet is like people find their niche and their community so much more easily. And so she's been really good about taking clips from this and sort of teasing it online to see like what people want. And I think like, over the course of just a few videos, like maybe like between 10 to 15 videos, there's millions of views on these things and thousands and thousands of comments of people wanting to see it. I think then of course that adds a different layer of pressure because you're like, hold on, all these people want to watch this film now that I hope honors even slightly what they want to see. But yeah, I think like you said, I think that is also what makes us excited to see it in person is because there is this sort of built-in buzz and fan base of people that know about it or want to see it just from socials, just from following Instagram or following her on Instagram or TikTok or and following Shannon and Megan. I'm kind of the only one that's not doing the socials train for it, but
Yeah, but you get to enjoy it, and
oh, for
yeah,
sure.
to watch it. And I think yeah, watching with an audience, with a diff audience in that wonderful program will be just so satisfying. Thank you so much for chatting with us,
Oh yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
and have a lovely diff. It's such a fun festival.
Thanks so much. Yeah, you
No
too.
matter what your taste, DIFF has an exciting lineup of screenings, talks, and industry panels until the 2nd of March, so check out their jam packed programme and line up at diff.ie.